Let's be clear here. The federal government is responsible for almost $1.5 trillion of the overall $1.6 trillion in student loan debt, around 92% of all debt. It's my understanding that only just over $100 billion of this debt is in private loans, which have a 98% repayment rate. Meanwhile, stats from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York suggest federal borrowers are not faring well, as more than 20% of all borrowers are seriously delinquent or in default. And a large number of federal borrowers are seeing their loan balances grow, not decrease, post-graduation. Mr. Delisle, given this bleak outlook for federal borrowers, shouldn't more be done to protect consumers from assuming more federal student loan assistance than they can reasonably pay back?
Yeah, I think the place to look for a solution like that most obviously is in graduate school lending. For undergraduates in the federal student loan program, there's a limit. Congress sets a limit on how much people can borrow, recognizing the kinds of things that you were talking about. A dependent undergraduate can only borrow $5,500 for their first year of school. When it comes to graduate school, Congress had the infinite wisdom to decide to lend unlimited sums to people to go to graduate school. And this is where the big problems are.
Well, let's explore that for a minute, Mr. Delisle. Does the federal government evaluate a borrower's ability to repay a loan before issuing a loan?
No.
A student who receives a needs-based Pell Grant could also have their parent take out a $100,000 Parent Plus loan, even though they've demonstrated that they don't have the means to repay. Is that correct?
That's right. In fact, the federal government will assess your ability to repay using the financial aid application, determine an expected family contribution for your child's education, and even if that number is zero, the federal government has determined you can contribute zero towards your student's education.
Stunning.
Then they will lend you an unlimited amount to pay for your child's education.
It seems some federal borrowers are set up for failure from the start by the rules put in place by Congress. What recommendations, briefly, would you make to Congress to prevent students and their parents from over-borrowing?
Well, I think that probably should restore some sensible limits to the amount that graduate students can borrow. And I think there's really no good public policy purpose served by having the Parent Plus loan program that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. The federal government took over the vast majority of student lending from private lenders in March 2010, as we've discussed. How does the design of these Department of Education contracts impact the ability of federal loan servicers to provide individualized service to borrowers?
Well, I mean, they have to carry out the terms that are set in law. So it can't be that individualized because they have to provide the borrowers the terms that they're entitled to. But they have some, because of all the different options and different situations that a borrower could find themselves in, people on the left and the right have decided that it's better that servicers have some discretion in how they counsel borrowers. So there's some flexibility for servicers to make decisions. I actually think one of the sort of unintended consequences here of some of these debates, and I look at some of the legislation that was posted today for the hearing, and there's a tendency to want to be more prescriptive of how servicers operate. And I just am a little bit concerned about that because I'm not sure I would supplant lawmakers' judgment for servicers' judgment in the best way to handle each student's individual situation.
Private student lenders make at least 18 disclosures on 3 separate occasions before a loan is made, providing much clearer information than is provided for federal direct loans. Would disclosures for federal loans like those private student loan borrowers make lead to better outcomes for student loan repayment, perhaps?
I don't really think this is an information problem. I held up the form that today, the 10-page form with the 60-cell matrix, and people still complain. There are thousands of complaints in the CFPB database about people saying they weren't informed.
Let me say this, would it help to have disclosures of accumulating debt made during the course of study rather than just when a student first enrolls and graduates?
Yeah, it may. I mean, the reason why, typically the government and Congress has shied away from doing exactly that, is they were worried it would scare people from continuing to borrow and finish their education. So I don't know what the right direction is on that.
My time is expired. I yield back.